Hi. Let us now look at assessment criteria 1.2 in societal impact. Okay, so in this assessment criteria, we're going to look at the analysis of customer awareness, customer attitudes, and behaviors relating to the social, environmental, and ethical landscape. So here are some of the key theories we're going to cover in terms of indicative content. And we start by understanding some examples of the importance of building consumer trust. So as an organization, you need to ensure that you build a reputation in the long term, a strong reputation. We call that corporate reputation management. So in order to build a long-term reputation, a company needs to work on the word trust. So how do you build trust? Now, these are some of the examples of some of the top companies in the world that have a high level of trust. You can see the examples, companies like Google, Samsung, Toyota. These are the most trustworthy companies ranked in 2024 in the world. So building trust with customers require that you acknowledge and respect their needs at every stage of the relationship, from the first contact through to the lifetime value of the customer. So here are some of the ways in which you can build customer trust. Of course, by offering great service and relationship marketing. You can encourage reviews and testimonials on Google reviews and other platforms. Be transparent. You can ask for feedback. You can create a loyalty program. Also, the kind of support that you have from call centers to your chatbots to your websites. Prioritize your customers, cultivate long-term relationships. So these are some of the ways in which you can build trust. And at the heart of societal impact is to build a long-term reputation through trust between the customer and the organization. And there are many ways to do this. Here's a great example of Otara, a Sri Lankan, who's built a great amount of reputation, right, through the trust that she has, the Embark program, right, where they take care of street dogs, rescues, and there's quite a bit of marketing that is practiced here. Now, one might look at this and say, is this really done for public relations purposes, or is it genuinely done? So that is a question that one must really look at. Sometimes most of these charitable exercises, reputation building exercises, public relations exercises are done, in order to manage a personal brand or a corporate brand. So either way, the genuineness of it is something that customers will decide. But a good way in which you can market it is something that is important, which we can learn through the Embark brand that Otara has created in Sri Lanka, right? So building long-term trust, if you have customer trust embedded in your brand, and if you are trustworthy, then you will have a fair degree of customer loyalty and long-term brand reputation. So in terms of increasing customer awareness, in terms of societal impact of an organization, there are so many things you can embrace. Climate change, social issues, ethical issues, all these are avenues or strategies that you can use to create awareness, right? Today, customers are concerned about global warming, deforestation, pollution, carbon footprint, and they are also interested in social issues. There are so many things from inclusion, diversity, fair wages, labor rights, CSR, and then there are ethical concerns. And although you don't realize it in the West, rather than in Sri Lanka, there are many customers who prefer brands over others owing to its ethical stance. So there's growing awareness of fair trade, ethical sourcing, animal welfare, and responsibility in terms of supply chains. So all these are avenues in which you can work through to build a responsible societal brand. And then in terms of the attitudes towards environmental and ethical issues, consumers expect brands to support diversity, inclusion, and fair labor practices. And companies that are seen as unethical will have backlash and boycotts. We have seen this with many, many examples. Many consumers expect companies to reduce carbon footprint and achieve net zero targets. There's also this concept called greenwashing, which we've looked at in the previous assessment criteria. So there are skeptics. There are people who look at your products and see, are you genuinely green or are you trying to greenwash your products? Customers are interested in fair trade. We discussed the fair trade logo. Fair trade is important to ensure that your suppliers get a fair price. The growers, the farmers get a fair price. Ethical sourcing and cruelty-free products. Transparency in supply chains are also important to build trust. So you can see the topics here. These are some of the topics that are pertinent in societal marketing. And let's look at some research. Now, these are facts and figures. 50% of global shoppers, according to PwC, say they will pay more for products made by ethical companies. 90% of Gen Z, now if you look at the different generations, the younger generations believe companies must act on environmental and social issues, according to McKinsey 2003. AC Nielsen says 65% of global consumers believe brands have a responsibility to give back to society, right? Companies with strong ESG strategies did better than the others. 70% of consumers prefer brands that actively support social causes, according to this Edelman's Trust Barometer, which we are going to learn. And 85% of customers prefer eco-friendly packaging and products. So this is a huge trend. You know, if you go to some of the Scandinavian countries, European countries, it's amazing to understand the level of love and affection customers and people in general, society, have towards environmentalism, green marketing, corporate social responsibility. You know, and sometimes in those countries, even if you throw a piece of paper on the road, people will stare at you, right? Because that's the kind of love they have for their society. So when you look at Sri Lankan context, we are probably different. Okay, we are a lot behind. But even as you go to the Middle East, some developed countries there, if you go to the West, and especially in countries like Europe, you can see a lot of people are concerned about the environment. Let us now talk about the ethics and social responsibility. Obviously, marketers need to frame their messages responsibly. At the end of the day, we are all trying to get more sales. We're all trying to get more attention out there. But ethical and moral philosophies that define what is right and wrong is something that the marketers need to be concerned about when advertising their products. Social responsibility is about minimizing an organization's negative impact and maximizing the positive impact on society, right? So you need to make sure you frame your messaging responsibly as a marketer. And here are some of the companies that have done really well in that. MAS produced what they called the ethical bra, right? Sri Lankan lingerie manufacturer, MAS, they are differentiating themselves as an organization through a philanthropic culture and ensuring especially that their, workers in their factories are taken care of well. And today they go out to their customers and demand a higher price because their customers want ethical sourcing. They want to make sure that people working in factories are not working in sweatshops. They are treated fairly. They are given proper wages. Their families, especially if they are women, right? How does the company treat women? Because women play a very important role in the social fabric. They have to bear children. They have to look after the children. And most of the factory workers are women. So the campaign that was carried out by the government was a campaign called Garments Without Guilt, Sri Lanka. Come to Sri Lanka. We are a country that sells garments without guilt. And companies like MAS did really well. And that's why today, still we are a very strong export brand in the garment space. So responsible messaging, you can see this Bacardi ad here, is something that you need to be concerned about as a marketer. Today, customers are increasingly cynical with ads like this. They will look at ads like this. Of course, it will gain attention, but in the long term, you will not be able to sustain your reputation. It might be legal. In some cases, it is not legal to run ads like this. But even if it is legal, is it ethical? So these are questions that one need to ask themselves, right, when it comes to framing messages. Here's another one by Burger King. Of course, it is an attention grabber. The choice of words and the visuals and the colors and everything that is used, it is an attention grabber. Yes, one can argue saying that's what marketing is about. However, marketers must frame their messages responsibly, because you also need to understand that you are creating all these messages within society and you're damaging the social fabric. You're ruining societal values if you do send out wrong messages. So marketers are increasingly called to be a part of the code of conduct in terms of responsibility marketing. Now, here are some good examples on how companies frame their messages. This is a fantastic example by a brand, that looks at the consumer behavioral change and also tries to bring about how recrafting, reusing, recycling, recrafting, this is the whole circular economy. Recrafting a shoe is better than new because they are yours. What a powerful message. So here's a company that does that. And they show you before recrafted and after recrafted. Don't get rid of it. It is yours. Recrafting is better than new. What a wonderful ad. So there's a huge shift towards people in the sharing economy, right? There's a huge shift towards people now looking at things differently because there's resource depletion. Of course, everything also is costly to buy a new. So there's a shift towards sustainable and ethical consumption. Everything that the consumer does, the consumer is starting to think about how can I do this more ethically? How can I do this in a more sustainable way? And it is true, right? Green consumerism. More people are switching to organic, vegan, carbon neutral, sugar free, upcycled, recycled products. Demand for ethical brands are increasing. Companies with fair trade, cruelty free, or sustainable sourcing see increased sales. You can also see a rise of the circular economy. We're going to discuss this topic a little later in this chapter. And there's growth in pre-owned or what we call second-hand shopping, especially in clothes, in shoes, in handbags. They call it different names. Even the luxury brands like Hermes, Louis Vuitton, Prada, Gucci, Armani, they all have a second line, which they call pre-owned collection, a pre-owned collection, right? So probably they use it to trade in from customers who want to buy something new, they take the old. It also happens in the car industry, right? So you have different kinds of recycling and trade-ins happening in the circular economy. And price sensitivity will always remain a barrier. Many consumers want sustainability, but hesitate if it costs significantly more. So you need to make sure your sustainability and efforts reduced cost, not increased costs. And once again, fair trade, as you can see here, is used quite a bit in the coffee industry, right? Eco-conscious brands like Patagonia, Tesla, the Body Shop benefit from strong brand loyalty owing to changes in consumer behavior. You know, post-COVID, the world has changed. People look at the world very differently. People have changed. The cancel culture in business. Consumers are quick to boycott brands involved in unethical practices. There's different hashtag movements, like the hashtag boycott movement on social media, right? You can check it out. And people instantly create a cancel culture. Ethical concerns have led to a decline in support for companies using exploitative behavior and exploitative labor. Brands that embrace ethical transparency build long-term customer loyalty. So these are some of the topics that we're talking about, cancel cultures, right? Hashtag movements, boycotts. This is the famous Patagonia ad. This is the famous Patagonia ad. Patagonia is one company that ran an ad, right? Don't buy this jacket. This is that. They said, don't buy this jacket. Instead of buying this jacket, I mean, they are a jacket selling company. What they said is, don't buy this jacket. Unless you really, really need a new jacket, don't buy it. Reduce, repair, reuse, recycle, reimagine. See how powerful this ad is, right? And here's another example of Nike. I have seen this shoe being displayed. It looks quite ugly, actually, if you don't know about the concept and you walk into a Nike store in New York, one of the largest Nike stores there in Manhattan. If you walk into any other big Nike store anywhere in the world, you'll see this shoe right in front and you're wondering, this looks dirty. This looks ugly. Why is Nike displaying this shoe? Unless you know the story. This is the Nike Air Vapor Max 2020 Flyknit sustainability product, right? So this is made out of all recycled materials, right? So there are some, I've seen actually customers wearing this and going on the road as well. It looks dirty. it looks sometimes quite bad on them, but then people who know the brand know that you have bought a recycled product. You have bought a product that has been made using recycled materials. So you are conveying a certain personality, right? And it's amazing how they feature it proudly, sometimes on the shelves, when it looks a little dirty because it has been used with recycled materials. All right. And here's another example from Google. The Google Pixel phone case made for over 70% recycled plastic. So it looks a little bad. It looks quite bad, actually, right? But there are many customers who still ordered it globally and used it, right, when Google launched the recycled covers. So that shows that today consumers are still interested in not just fashion, but also fashion that is sustainable. And ideally, if it is a reduced price, it is even better. Okay. So consumers are more aware and more demanding and more likely to take action based on social, environmental, and ethical factors. As you can see, this is a WWF World Wildlife Federation ad. See how beautifully it is communicated. The message is communicated. The signs of global warming. The signs of global warming. See how beautifully it is communicated in a simple ad. At the WWF, the World Wildlife Federation, has some of the most stunning ads like this that are thought-provoking ads. And consumers are called to be, uh, you know, mindful with these campaigns, and they really hit you, right, and they are really attention grabbing. So companies must be transparent, authentic with their sustainability claims, make sustainable products affordable to reach a wider audience, educate consumers on the impact of their choices, and finally, integrate the ESG principles into their core business strategies. And that's something very, very important. Because if your primary objective in a business is obviously for revenue and profit maximization, but if you also have an ethical, social, environmental agenda, you need to integrate those ESG practices into your business practices. If not, the ESG practices won't work and there will be false claims. So we spoke about diversity and equality, ED and I, before as a concept. Here's a beautiful Neutrogena ad, right? This is a beautiful Neutrogena ad that uses this day in India, which is full of vibrant colors, right? The holly, okay? And how Neutrogena expresses and is a part of that special day. May your day be full of color, celebration, and a makeup remover that removes 99% of makeup to help with the cleanup. Wherever today takes you, you are celebrating today. So I think it's a beautiful message, okay? Because after the holiday, it's called the Holi, right? It's a festival of color, an explosion of color. Sometimes it's really difficult to clean up after that. So this is the Neutrogena message saying, embrace diversity, right? Consumer behavior is evolving as people become more conscious of diversity, equality, and inclusion. And increasingly, consumers expect brands to align with their values, norms, cultures, religious values, subcultures, leading to shifts in purchasing decisions, brand loyalty, and corporate accountability. So in terms of inclusion and ethics, we also saw these movements. The Me Too movement, hashtag Me Too movement, is gaining a lot of momentum, even in Asia, right? In countries like China, in countries like Japan, the Me Too movement, the LGBTQ plus rights movements, the Black Lives Matter movement in the States, that was after George Floyd's death caused by police brutality. So you can see all these things are proliferated today with social media like Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook. There's a, social media activism that is taking place in a conversation, and many people sharing posts, uploading, retweeting. Or now it's called X, not Twitter. Okay, so all these platforms, in a sense, are used to take a message out there on inclusion and ethics. So companies need to leverage this and be a part of it. One company that did this very well was Nike. I will show you the ad in the next page. Consumers actively search company policies on diversity, fair play, and inclusive hiring. And this is something they do, especially Gen Z. They look at your company hiring policy. And the cancel culture that we spoke of, the boycotts, where people take to the streets, people take to social media and boycott brands for discriminatory practices. And this was an interesting campaign, right, where they used football, and Nike used this football star when they had a bad, Nike had a bad publicity campaign, but Nike saw that this football star was increasing in fame, and he is the first one who started to kneel down when the national anthem was played in the USA, right, in football games. He started to kneel. He started to kneel down. He took a stand and he said, Black Lives Matter. So a lot of people, a lot of blacks joined, then some of the whites joined. This is after George Floyd's death. And you can watch this video. I put this video, how Nike used this, this trend started by this footballer to kneel, how they use this trend in a campaign, believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything, just do it, right? Please watch this video on how the Nike sales after this campaign went through the roof. Inclusion and ethics, again, there are so many things that we need to talk of, especially inclusion in terms of LGBTQ. You have lots of people that in the West that support this using the flags so that they also encourage diversity and inclusion. Consumers increasingly support minority-owned brands and businesses, right? So sometimes you, in the West, if you go into pubs and bars, you will see, the LGBTQ flag, but sometimes they do it only during a LGBTQ season or parade or something like that, Christmas or something like that. Otherwise, they've forgotten about it. So that is also really bad. You need to, if your diversity and your inclusion policies must run throughout the year, it should not be just done as something that you do for a particular season. Okay. And consumers are increasingly supporting minority brands. This also happens in some countries. You would see in big supermarkets, in big stores, sometimes you see very small brands. That means they are supporting the locals. They're supporting the locals, who come with maybe cheese or vegetables or something small. And you can see that they are doing it to ensure that the locals are not killed, because the local businesses also must be supported. So how you support the minority brands? Okay. and rainbow washing and diversity. It's also called the washing backlash. Consumers criticize brands that market diversity only during the Pride Month or Black History Month without real commitment. This is a problem. This is a problem. Companies use this as a marketing opportunity. Authenticity matters. Consumers demand action, not just marketing slogans. So you have to be authentic. Consumers will judge you. They know when you do something, they know. Consumers boycott brands that fail to uphold diversity and equality. Example is H&M and Gucci faced backlash for racially insensitive marketing, leading to boycotts. And this happens quite a lot in the West. You can see also this picture today. Sometimes when you go into department stores, sometimes you wonder, you see different pictures. Sometimes people with cancer, people with disabilities used in ads. And that is done purposely to ensure that to ensure there is inclusiveness, equality. Otherwise, you would always have models, high-end models, the most prettiest children, the most beautiful looking children like dolls with green eyes. Today, those things are seen as cynical ads because, you know, you are not appealing to the entire society. You're not appealing to the normal human nature. So today there are problems, there are health issues, medical issues, disability issues, mental issues. You have to make sure that that as an organization, you represent all those segments in society and you cover your EDI, equality, as well as your diversity and inclusion covers a larger spectrum of society. So accessibility is something that brands in the West think about. Accessibility. When you talk about accessibility, it can be digital accessibility and removing barriers for people with disabilities, right? Increase social media activism. There are disability advocates. These are some of the hashtag movements. There are high-profile lawsuits in the West, like the ones that are mentioned here. So accessibility is something that, especially in the retail setup, you have to make sure that everyone has access. There are proper elevators, lifts, right? You can't say you can't access this area. It has to be just like you have to have fire exits. You have to have accessibility points, right? For all the disabilities. Consumers expect businesses to comply with accessibility regulations in digital platforms, workspaces, and physical spaces. Today, there are AI voice assistants, screen readers. There's the Apple VoiceOver, Google TalkBack to improve digital inclusion. Closed captions and audio descriptions are now expected in video content. The rise of smart home technology and adaptive devices increases awareness of assistive solutions. You know, they take these disability and accessibility issues very, very seriously in the West. They take it very seriously in the West, especially in the countries like UK, Australia, New Zealand, and in some of European countries, in the States. They take this accessibility very, very seriously, and we should, even in this part of the world, take it very seriously. Businesses that fail to provide digital accessibility lose potential customers, right? Inclusive products and services. We discussed the Nike Fly shoes, Xbox adaptive controller, neurodiversity friendly workspaces and shopping experiences, and accessible packaging. So you see, you have to appeal to the blind, people with hearing aids, people with neuro disabilities, Parkinson's disease, wheelchair access. You know, you have to appeal to all these people equally, right? Especially with regards to accessibility. Disabled consumers have over 8 trillion in spending, according to the World Economic Forum. So it's a huge market. Consumers with disabilities, caregivers, and allies actively support accessible brands. Businesses that offer disability inclusive employment attract more socially conscious consumers. I have seen even Sri Lankan companies like Dilma. You go into some of the Dilma stores in Sri Lanka, especially the Colombo 7-1, maybe the one that used to be in uh, the one that used to be in Dutch Hospital. You would see some disabled people working there because uh, that shows that they are a company that does not discriminate because of a disability. But many companies discriminate, right? Of course, if you can't, if the job requires you to have all your abilities to perform, then it's a different story. But a lot of disabled people are very, very loyal. They're very good in their job, and they need the job, right? They won't leave the company. They're really loyal. So it is actually a huge opportunity for the company to employ them because they are sometimes much better than the people who are able to perform. When you have disabilities, you sometimes develop amazing skills and competencies, right? So it's a huge area in the West, and discrimination towards that is strictly forbidden, and you also will be penalized. So the concept of environmentalism, right? It is an organized movement of concerned citizens, businesses, and government agencies designed to protect and improve people's current and future living environment. Environmentalism, lobby groups, pressure groups are there in every single industry. Environment sustainability, Adidas sets ambitious goals for sustainable products and operations. The Pali shoes and apparel are created with yarn made from recycled plastic waste, intercepted from the world's beaches and coastal communities before it reaches the ocean. How do you like that? So you can see sustainable products today used by even famous brands. Carbon footprint, a term that captures the total negative CO2 emissions and the impact associated with a product or service. So you need to understand some of these definitions. The term regenerative, what do you mean by regenerative? So a regenerative economy is a regenerative business that gives back far more to society and the planet than it uses. Actually, this is so true, right, guys? If you take companies like Unilever, manufacturing companies, right? Nestle, sometimes the amount of raw materials, water, other resources that are used, electricity, water, air, and so many other things that are used, ingredients, raw materials. Sometimes one wonders whether if all companies start excessively manufacturing like this, right? Will our children have a future? Will all the waterways, the rivers be polluted? What can companies do about this? Now, in a regenerative economy, what it means is you give back more than you're ruining. You give back more than that you're ruining. Okay. So sometimes it's a little difficult to sort of understand this. Now, if you look at companies like Ceylon Tobacco kills people from one side with their products, right? So, but on the other side, they are one of the companies that grows the highest amount of trees in this country. So it is something that you do to circumvent your guilt. Okay. Ideally, if you can stop selling that product, it will be better for society, but that's their core business, right? Tobacco. So they are also one of the biggest tree growers in this country. So what they're saying is to circumvent any negative impacts that we create, we will grow a higher number of trees in this country. So like that, Coca-Cola is the same. Coca-Cola is sugar and water, the most unhealthy drink you can have, right? But then it's the most famous drink that everyone wants to drink on a hot day. So, but then whilst offering that, you also need to make sure your processes are regenerative. Your business model is regenerative. Give back far more to society than and the planet than you consume or take in your manufacturing process. And a circular economy is a model of production and consumption which involves sharing, leasing, reusing, repairing, refurbishing, recycling existing materials and products as long as possible. So you can see in the circular approach, you have raw materials, sustainable design, production, distribution, consumption, reuse, repair, collection, residual waste, and you manage your waste. And this is a continuous cycle. And throughout this cycle, you are practicing sustainable principles, right? So how can you reuse, repair? How can you take your residual waste and see what you can do with it in terms of recycling, in terms of ensuring that the environment is safe? Then your manufacturing, your distribution, your design, how can all those be sustainable? IKEA buys back, right? They are some of their second-hand products. IKEA they buy back. They have a buyback program for some of their second-hand products. So does Levi's. They have a separate marketplace to buy back second-hand products. So that is circularity. That is a circular economy. A circular economy business model, right? If you are renting, resale, repairing, right? That is a circular business model. That means you are discouraging new, but you are trying to reuse and recycle the old. That is the circular economy, right? So the sharing economy. The sharing economy is something that is here to stay. You have the Airbnbs, Ubers, Zipcars, Turos that have made the sharing economy more convenient, affordable, flexible, sustainable, and accessible, right? And this is here to stay. Especially the millennials, Gen Z, today, they're not shy to share. You're okay to share. And there are many, many things that people share without buying, new. So instead of buying a new car, there are many people who Uber it. It's far cheaper, far more convenient, sustainable, flexible, and sometimes accessible. Consumers see sharing an eco-friendly alternative to ownership, reducing waste and consumption. Rising living costs and inflation encourage consumers to rent, share, and subscribe instead of purchasing outright. Especially millennials and Gen Z, digital natives who prioritize convenience, flexibility, and affordability. Urban dwellers, those who live in the city, benefit from shared mobility, co-living spaces, shared workspaces, sustainability conscious consumers, people seeking low carbon alternatives to traditional consumption. So the sharing economy is here to stay, right? Platforms now focus on trust building strategies. That is verified users, customer reviews, AI driven fraud detection systems so that the sharing economy will grow. Peer-to-peer subscription based models across multiple sectors. Transportation has ride sharing, car sharing, car hailing, e-scooter and bike sharing. Housing and workspaces have home sharing, co-living spaces, co-working spaces. Then if you look at the fashion and consumer goods industry, there's clothing rental, tool and equipment sharing. So the sharing economy today is a big industry, a big industry. Then you have the net zero economy. The net zero economy is the race to net zero. It aims to balance greenhouse gas emissions by reducing carbon output and offsetting unavoidable emissions. So you might have a net zero ambition or a target. The climate change impact, increased weather, extreme weather events, wildfires, right? We see these events every year. Rising temperatures heighten public concern. So the governments have pushed for net zero targets. Example, UK by 2050, EU to be carbon neutral by 2050. And there's also the US Inflation Reduction Act. So corporate pledges, companies like Apple, Microsoft, Unilever, Tesla have committed to net zero goals. We don't know whether they'll achieve them, but they are trying to progress towards that. Investors and ethical shoppers support businesses prioritizing ESG principles. So the net zero economy, there are many companies today that have put forward their net zero plans. Companies like Unilever, Oatly now provide carbon footprint labels on packaging. Electric vehicle adoption is rising despite higher upfront costs. And you have brands like Allbirds, Patagonia that attract loyal customers through genuine climate action, genuine efforts. Rail travel is growing in Europe as an alternative to short-haul flights. And you have sleeper trains that are coming about, sleeping trains, right? Of course, it takes time, but it is safer, it is environment friendly, cheaper, and you get rest and relax as well. Carbon trapping acts. There are a few apps helps consumers track and reduce their carbon footprint. So it is made available and affordable and democratized so that everyone can use it. Here's the Toyota environmental challenge by 2050. So you can see what they're aiming to do in terms of their Toyota environmental challenge by 2050, contributing to a better society through net positive impact. So their net zero challenge has 6 areas, and all companies have such a challenge. All large companies have a net zero plan for the next 30, 40 years. Again, another beautiful ad by the World Wildlife Federation. You can see the message before it's too late. That's it. Deforestation. Avoid deforestation because it is the lung. It is the lung. So we have already ruined partially our lung. Protect the rest. That is the message. And now we come into 2 important areas. We start off by first discussing the Paris Climate Agreement. Please read up on this. I have included some videos on this. So the world leaders, they signed a pact to try and prevent temperatures rising more than 1.5 Celsius. It's almost all the world nations for the first time agree to cut greenhouse gas emissions and reduce global warming. So this was the target. This was signed in 2015. Unfortunately, Donald Trump left it when he became the president first time. Then Joe Biden went back again into the Paris Climate Agreement. Again, now he's threatening to go out of it. So, I mean, it's really funny. But this is a global pact. This is a global pact. So you can see the idea here is by 2100, these are your past emissions. So if emissions continue at 2.5 to 2.9 Celsius will be somewhere here. If everyone pledges to their target, they'll be somewhere here. Right? All countries in the world have pledged to their target. They'll be somewhere here by 2100. And the goal is to reach here, 1.5 Celsius. That's the target to achieve. So this is the Paris Climate Agreement to reduce the effect of greenhouse gas emissions and global warming. And finally, the Carbon Literacy Project. Now, I have included a video on this. You can have a look at it. This is actually a not-for-profit organization. It has over 111,000 individuals from 7,900 organizations who have registered in this organization to understand carbon literacy. They do courses, short courses, they do crash courses, so that you can get qualified in carbon literacy. Otherwise, what happens is everyone talks about carbon literacy, but are you truly carbon literate? An awareness of the carbon costs and impacts of everyday activities and the ability and motivation to reduce emissions on an individual, community, and organizational basis. So the Carbon Literacy Project, the primary goal is to increase the literacy levels of everyone. So there are individuals, organizations, trainers, consultants. All these people need to get carbon literate, and you can be a certified carbon literate trainer, consultant, individual, or organization. All right. So that is assessment criteria 1.2. I will see you in ACE 1.3.